Okay, you read the title of the video, so let's talk grass. These little tufts are grass. This is grass right here. These vines are not grass, that's ceiling stuff. This isn't grass, these are vines. And touching grass means that either you broke a piece of grass, or the knight's interaction hitbox overlapped with the grasses. These orange things are the grass hitboxes, and I'll be showing them a lot throughout the video, so I figured I would let you know right away. You know, being a speedrunner with a playtime so big it can only display in cookie clicker numbers, I've developed a bit of an aversion to going outside. Also, it's winter right now, there's not much grass to be touched. Anyway, I had a really dumb idea to see if I could bring this aversion with me back inside. So, today we're gonna theorize and figure out if you can beat Hollow Knight without touching any grass. Already, as we drop into King's Pass, the reality of this silly challenge run is gonna set in right away. Luckily, all of these pieces of grass are very easily avoidable with some well-timed jumps. Some of them are placed in the foreground, so we don't need to worry about them. As we start breaking the doors, however, there's a few pieces of grass in the way. By the way, for hitboxes, the orange ones of the grass and the orange one inside the knight are the relevant ones. And these pieces of grass are pretty easily jumped over. Only a few seconds later, though, we run into a bit of a problem. Once again, here's two pieces of grass blocking a really narrow tunnel. If we look at the hitboxes, there is a very small gap, wide enough for the knight to stand in between the two pieces. The ceiling geometry makes this one really awkward, but it is actually possible. However, once we pass into the lower totem, there's even more grass on the other side. Sadly, this one is impossible. I just couldn't make it happen. And even with the most precise jump, you don't get enough height to clear the very last corner. This makes this piece of grass unpassable, unfortunately. So, is that it? We are brought to a crossroads. Well, technically, not quite yet. We're still in King's Pass.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Nope, but we have a few options here. Do we, A, give up right away and call it a day? That would make for a very short YouTube video. B, completely break the game with glitches to get past this grass, but risk the entire point of the challenge being made redundant by, well, the power of glitches. Or C, continue in no major glitches and see how few grass touches are required to beat the game. I ended up going with option C. I can pretty comfortably assume, with my knowledge of Hollow Knight glitches, that you can beat the entire game easily without a single grass touch, mainly due to the ability to break out of bounds. For fun though, let me show you just one glitched way to get past this piece of grass. By dying and performing a really awkward shade skip into the Fury area, you can do a precise turnaround jump on this ledge, giving you an airwalk state. This tricks the game into thinking you're still on the ground while you're jumping. If you unpress and repress jump on consecutive frames at the peak of your height, you can perform another jump. On current patch, the first air jump you do can be buffered out of the pause menu, but the second one has to be done manually. So with a few consecutive frame perfect inputs, you're able to jump up to the spike pit above Fury. And you've now circumvented that one piece of grass. Or, you know, main menu storage. Here's a video on that if you're curious. Anyway, for our challenge run's sake, I'll add a grass counter in the bottom and increment it by 1. The fun part of doing the challenge like this is that some of you might actually be able to improve upon my run with some slightly better routing. Do let me know if you actually do that, that would be really cool. Anyway, moving on. There's a piece of grass right on top of where we speedrunners tend to jump out of the King's Pass door, which I fell prey to once, that was kind of funny. But other than that, Dirtmouth is just jumping, so that's pretty simple. Crossroads is going to be interesting. This is the hardest point of the run, mainly because we don't have any movement abilities and therefore are very limited in our maneuverability. We can get around the grass in the first room pretty easily by just jumping well. But once we cross this transition, we run into a bit of a problem. There's a piece of grass right on the scene transition. And unfortunately, since this is the only way forward at this point in the game, there's no way to get around it. I checked whether you could loop back the right side, but it turns out that other scene transition has the exact same issue, which is unfortunate. So, add another grass touch. On the entrance to the Aspid room, I thought I was going to run into the same issue, but luckily this one is barely jumpable. When we enter the very next room though, we come barreling straight into a piece of grass. Sadly, this one is unavoidable, but the next two are pretty easy to jump. It turns out Crossroads grass is quite relentless, because not only does the exit of this room have the same issue, but so does the entrance of the next one, followed by another piece of grass that's blocked by a very low arch. Oh well, 3 grass to the counter. This is followed by some pretty fun grass avoiding movement where you get to pogo the gomes. But once we cross the next transition, there's another piece of grass waiting in ambush. It's like Team Cherry knew that someone was gonna attempt this and placed grasses in all of the screen entrances. The next room is followed by the very same thing, a piece of grass waiting for us right as we cross the transition. Luckily, due to this grass's placement, we can actually abuse a bit of RNG. The time you're locked into walking out of a transition in Hollow Knight actually varies by about a frame or two. If we're lucky, we gain control of our character right before we overlap with it. From here on, there's no unavoidable grass all the way until False Night, with one small exception. The entrance to the Crossroads stag is completely blocked off by grass. Having it would have been really nice, because it would have been a way to backtrack through Crossroads without touching any of those transition grasses we've mentioned so far. Oh well. We make our way to False Night and fight the boss in its entirety, picking up the city crest as well. This is gonna be our way into city later. There is one piece of grass by the chest here that we can just barely avoid. After this, we're able to pick up the Vengeful Spirit, and from here on, we're gonna have a lot more freedom. At this point, we've reached a big problem. How the hell do you get through Greenpath without touching any grass? Well, what if we don't go to Greenpath at all? Bear with me here, I'll explain. After leaving Mound, we go back down to the Aspid Arena room, and we make sure that we have full soul on the way. Sadly, this does mean we have to touch this piece of grass again though. Another really good use of the Fireball spell is showcased right here, as we can use it to stall our fall, thereby getting past this grass that would have been impossible prior to this. Now that we're in the fungal entrance room, however, I'm going to show you a strategy. This is a slope ball, a trick that can be used for a few really interesting skips throughout the game. Basically, Hollow Knight is a game that isn't really built around slopes. So, the slopes that do exist in level geometry are a little bit janky sometimes. If the fireball projectile shoots into a slope at the correct angle, it can be redirected and slowed down. Just like the Shade's fireballs, the Knight's very own fireballs are also pogoable. So, in this room, we're able to jump, shoot a really precise fireball at this tiny slope right there, and pogo on it as it gets redirected. And just like that, we've entered Fungal Wastes without even going into Greenpath. Do note that if you want to try this yourself, you need to cap your game's frame rate to 50 frames per second, as it's only really consistent at that frame rate. Lucky for us, we're free from grass this entire area, so I grab a Charm Notch and make my way down towards Claw. Ew, grass. Here, I can either do the dashless explosion pogo or go around. This is an explosion pogo setup that I've never learned, so I decided to go around. And once I reached this acid pit, I had to do a really precise triple fireball skip. From here on, we grab Claw and make our way towards City. An unexpected challenge appeared, however. Actually getting into City ended up being really tricky. Without dash, the acid bridge ended up being a really awkward exercise. It ended up being a gauntlet of really unique fireball skips that you wouldn't really see outside of, say, a randomizer. I ended up having to unlock one of the bridge segments, walk all the way back to gather more soul and fungal, only to perform one more really precise triple fireball skip in the second segment. And my reward was getting to enter the City of Tears. City, being a very central, grass-free area, had a really important purpose in this run. Obviously, there was progression in the form of dive, but I was also eyeing my paths back into Crossroads. After all, to enter Crystal Peak, I was gonna have to go through there. The connections to resting grounds, waterways, and basin were also very important later. While in City, I grabbed a relic or two and then made my way to Soul Sanctum. Now, I thought Soulmaster was gonna be a bit awkward without dash, but it turned out to be really easy. Apologies if I'm rushing through a lot of these things, it's just that I just spent like 10 minutes talking about Crossroads. I guess the main focus of this video is on avoiding the grass. So a lot of the other stuff you've seen in a billion other challenge runs, I'm just gonna skip through it a little bit. Now, at this point, as we're leaving City, I had to do a bit of thinking about the routing. The next item of interest was Crystal Heart in Crystal Peak. And while there's little to no grass there, we do have to make it through Crossroads again to get to Crystal Peak. Our two options are taking the storeroom stag to Dirtmouth and traveling from Dirtmouth to the top Crystal Peak entrance via the Black Egg Temple route, or instead taking the storeroom's elevator and going to the same place but this time from below. After testing both of these, I realized that both of them resulted in 2 grass touches, sadly. Either one here, and here, or here and here. And if you're thinking about the stag station from earlier, that would have resulted in 3 grass touches. 1 to unlock it, 1 to leave it, and once again 1 to enter this room. Actually, this one is fireball skippable, but still, it would still be 2. So, we add 2 more grass touches to the counter, making it 11. I chose the top route mainly because I wanted to find out if I could get to the Black Egg Temple later, and it turned out I had to do some really fun fireball skips here as well. There was no grass early in the route though, which meant I could get to the temple pretty easily. Now, Crystal Peak is pretty easy usually in speedruns, but it is a completely different beast without dash. If you've seen a low percent speedrun, you know what's up. The first part is kind of just climbing, but the final gauntlet in particular is really challenging. Without dash, we're required to do a few fireball skips and also do a lot of jumping off of these really narrow ledges on the sides of the platforms to get just that extra bit of distance. The conveyors and flipping platforms on top of this makes this a really unforgiving section, but it's still ultimately pretty doable. Now that we've gotten Crystal Heart, we can make our way to the resting grounds. I thought this Crusher section right here was impossible for a few seconds, before I realized that I literally just picked up C-Dash. Yeah, I'm a bit stupid sometimes, if you haven't noticed. Anyway, we have to do this dark room without dash, which I was also not very used to, so it ended up taking me a few tries. We do Crystallized Mound, grab Descending Dark for boss fight purposes, and then move on to Resting Grounds. The Resting Grounds themselves have no grass at all, but the dream cutscene has a lot of it. This was all very dodgeable just by jumping, but it did look pretty scary going in, because I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to do this one. The utter eyesore of also having to see every floating platform spawn radius certainly didn't help at all either. But after some awkward jumping later, we're able to get through. Anyway, we grab Dreamnail and also fight Zero. The reason for this is because we're gonna have to gather a bunch of essence. The essence goal I had in mind is 900 because I really need the Dream Gate. The reason for this is the existence of the Teacher's Archives. You see, the Fog Canyon area has a lot of grass. And when you pick up a Dreamer, you are hard saved to that location. This means that your spawn point after quitting out is set to that location. Therefore, we can't quit out after Monomon to escape Fog Canyon. So in order to escape the area with minimal grass touches, we're gonna have to get Dreamgate. The next thing I wanted to do, therefore, was go down to Ancient Basin. But this created its own routing conundrum. Because if I went to Basin and got wings, it would infect the Crossroads, which would block this entrance right here, forcing me to get to Failed Champion for Essence through one of the paths that requires us to walk through a transition grass. Instead, I went and fought Zero, and after that went to the Blue Lake. Because I'm stupid, I forgot I have C-Dash, and I had to waddle all the way across. Hey, we are at the Blue Lake, I guess, which is canonically my home in Hallownest. Is this a good time to tell you to subscribe if you want? Well, if you want to do that, that would be cool. Thank you. Anyway, the exit had some fun grass dodging, and on the other side of this transition was a really awkward piece of grass. This one would have been easy with wings, but it turns out despite this narrow gap, it was possible without. So we save Sly, and then we're able to go up all the way to Failed Champion without any piece of grass in the way, which is very convenient. I feel like this is a pretty good demonstration of how much routing matters in a challenge like this.
Great.
And lucky for me, aside from these little feathers, there was no grass in the Failed Champion arena, so I was able to fight him just fine, albeit with a kind of weird and weak build. Anyway, from here we quit out back to Resting Grounds, and then we're off to City. I could have done this through Right City, which probably would have been easier, but I decided to awkwardly go through Waterways instead. This is mainly because I wanted to get Isma's Tear on the way, and because we don't have dash, we can't do the Spike Tunnel skip to get to the right side from the broken elevator. So I stacked to storerooms, got the key, sold some relics to Lem, and then headed down into Waterways. I did fight Watcher Knights and get Lurian at this point also, which is relevant because it did infect Crossroads, even though the wings would have done that anyway. So that's 1 out of 3 Dreamers collected. Anyway, while in Waterways, I did have to fight Dung Defender, which I guess is a bit of a plus. This of course being because we don't have dash, and therefore can't do the acid skip to get in and have to go in through the regular route, thereby having to lower the acid. I navigated Waterways to the C-Dash spot, and then C-Dash across into Isma's Grove. Also, can we just talk about this room for a second, this arena? I had no idea this existed. This has got to be one of the most, forgotten about rooms in Hollow Knight. After Isma, you might be realizing that, there hasn't been any grass in a while. After all, you said this challenge run was gonna be really hard. Well, Ancient Basin. My main goal here was to get wings, of course, but I also needed the essence from Lostkin, so I couldn't really skip this area. Not having dash in this area proved really punishing. For the first time here, I started to use the C-dash as a tool. Already in the first main room, I figured out I could use a C-dash to pass these 3 grasses and enter the transition. Ultimately, what made this place so tricky to navigate grasslessly was the really narrow corridors. This resulted in some incredibly precise jumps. What got me through ended up being a combination of fireball skips, clever C-dashes, and just really precise jumping. Somehow, I was able to navigate it all without touching grass a single time. But just because I got to the Broken Vessel arena doesn't mean that I was done, because there was grass in here as well. It wasn't really a problem, I just had to be aware of my surroundings, and the boss wasn't really hard. Of course, they stood no match to the classic stunlock D-Dark technique. And we got the essence, and then got wings. There were a few more tricky grass dodges in the final room too, just to make things spicy until the end. From here on, I climbed all the way back up to City. I still needed 100 essence for Dreamgate, so I went back to Fungal Wastes through I awkwardly climbed all the way up to Elder Hu and fought him for the 100 essence. After that, I could quit out to Hidden Station Stag and make my way all the way to Dirtmouth. Having unlocked Sly earlier, I bought myself the Lantern. I didn't actually need this as I can do Dark Deep Nest, but I wanted to make it a little bit more watchable and a little less tedious for myself. Especially considering how annoying the other dark room I did was without dash. I also went to Resting Grounds to pick up Dreamgate, of course. Now, the last 2 Dreamers were going to be the most awkward point in this run, mainly due to Fog Canyon. The Crossroads entrance to Fog Canyon was blocked due to this piece of grass right here in the Gruzzer room, so I was forced to return to Fungal Wastes. Due to having Ismas, I could use this entrance right here. Now, right from the get-go, Fungal Wastes' floor is largely grass. That means that even stepping through a transition usually results in a grass touch, as you're forced to do the walk-in animation. Due to this, I tried to C-dash through as many transitions as possible in Fog Canyon, as that made me airborne while entering the room and thereby avoided the grass touch. This worked for the first transition, but as I entered the bottom of the Trinomi Drop room, I realized I would have an issue. To enter the next room, I would have to touch grass either way. My options were either jumping from the acid, doing a wings into the transition, and walking into 2 pieces of grass in the next room, 1 on the grass and 1 decoration. Or jumping onto this platform and C-dashing out. You would think the C-dash would be the less grass-touchy option, but on the other side of the transition lies 2 pieces of decoration grass, which were unavoidable if you were C-dashing. Even if you stopped the C-dash into the transition, you would touch 2 pieces of grass. Same issue as before. Because you had to touch grass to do the C-dash in the previous room, this would result in 3 grass touches. The other option, however, would only be 2. 1 to walk out of the screen transition, 1 to touch the first grass, from which you would be able to jump over the second. Truly, these are the lengths you have to go to avoid touching grass in Hollow Knight. So, that's 13 grass touches. The rest of this tunnel was very easily avoidable due to this stone slab platform, and I was able to C-dash off the wall into the next room and land directly on a stone slab in front of the doorway, avoiding all grass touches. After this, D-Dark gave me the ability to get a nice Umu 2 cycle, and then I was off to Monomon, who I promptly dispatched. That's 2 out of 3 Dreamers. As I had gotten and set the Dreamgate earlier, I was able to leave this arena very easily without having to go through Fog Canyon again. I had put my Dreamgate at a stag station, so I had to walk all the way to Fungal Waste again. After returning there, I was now off to Deep Nest. I took the Crumbling Pit entrance because it was the easiest and it really didn't matter, aside of course from the Queen's Gardens one being completely blocked off. Luckily, Deep Nest's decorations consist mostly of rocks and these fungi, which aren't grass. So, I was able to slowly meander through. I still didn't have dash, so it was a bit of a trek, but alas. I made it all the way to Distant Village, and as I had acquired both C-dash and wings, I was able to skip the trapped bench entirely. I don't think there was any grass on the other path, but this just made things a lot quicker. So after getting past the Devout, I reached Terra, and then the final Dreamer was acquired. At this point, only one question remained. Was there any grass blocking my path to the Black Egg Temple? I returned to Dirtmouth, and it was time to find out. Was 13 gonna be our final number? It turns out that, yes, it would. Editor Blue here, it turns out it would not. The real number was in fact 12 and not 13, because that piece that I called a double grass earlier, I went back and checked, It wasn't actually a double grass. Both pieces were contained in the same hitbox. Therefore, the top route into peak was better with only one grass touch, and therefore we skip a grass touch. Yay! There were a few pieces of grass in the 2 rooms leading up to the Black Egg Temple, but they were all pretty easily avoidable. I entered the Black Egg Temple, walked, and walked, and walked. Oh wait, I can see dash, I'm stupid. Until I finally made it to the inner chamber. And lucky for me, there was no grass present. So I broke the chains and started the fight. And despite my sorrowful siblings' locked-in condition, I really hadn't touched much more grass than them. So I did some descending darks. This fight was really easy. And boom, there you go. There is my theoretical route for beating Hollow Knight with as few grass touches as possible. Honestly, this was a really fun challenge. It's been a while since I routed something like this myself, and it was really fun to just slap on some arbitrary conditions and try to see what I could do with it. So, there's Hollow Knight beaten in only 12 grass touches. Now, lucky for me, I didn't actually perform this run single segment, because it would be really, really annoying to do, especially because of Crossroads and Ancient Basin. But you know, if anyone tries to do this run single segment, or improves on my route, that would be really cool. I don't know. Outside of that, if you've enjoyed the video, do subscribe, maybe, if you want to. I would really appreciate that. Thank you again so much for all the support recently. I know I haven't been uploading or making any videos that much recently. I guess I've been kind of in a state of burnout, or lack of, I guess, energy for the creative stuff that I enjoy doing. So I haven't really been speedrunning that much. I haven't been streaming at all, almost. And I've been slacking off on the videos. So hopefully that passes soon. I guess a little bit of a break has helped a bit. I have a few other video ideas that are kind of similar to this that might be fun to explore. So we'll see if I end up making those. Anyway, thank you for watching. Have a wonderful day. Bye.